name's Ned Burwell. I am your host and the creator of You Matter. I'm here again with Nadine. Thanks for coming on again today.
You're very welcome, Ned. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to be here. Today we're going to talk about the topic of stress.
Stress. Everybody's got stress, right?
This is a topic that I've been sort of bugging Nadine about to let's talk about stress.
Been stressing me out about it.
I've been stressing her out on this topic.
Yeah.
So maybe we could start out the talk with briefly, what is stress?
Well, stress is a response of the autonomic response system in the body that we perceive some kind of a threat, whether it be from our thoughts, from the environment, sometimes just from our physiology. Like if we have too many coffees, for example, that can emulate the same sensations in our body, right?
Or not enough.
Or not enough coffee, as the case may be if we're expected to do something productive, right?
Yeah.
But it's a very normal, natural response that we share with all animals as well. And it just means that the alarm system of the brain is going off in order to prepare us for fight or flight, to escape or deal with whatever threat or situation is coming at us.
That's right. And it's so prevalent today, and it's always framed in a negative sense. How is stress actually good for us?
Well, that's funny that you should say that, because stress is, like all emotions, a functional emotion that is meant to help and protect. So I get a lot of clients that'll come in and they'll say things like, "Can you take all my stress away?" I'm like, well, if I could, then I would actually endanger your life because you would walk into traffic. You know, you need to have stress in order to be able to perceive what is good or not so good about the environment around you and what threats may be actually happening. It becomes a problem, though, when we're perceiving non-threatening things as threatening, or if we're allowing certain thoughts to become threatening, such as a lot of future forward thinking, where we're doing the questioning of what if, which can really make stress a problem for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed that in my own life, I sometimes will have fears, and the fears are illogical.
That can really happen for a lot of people, for sure. So that's one of the kinds of therapy that we use in order to counteract the effects of stress, is something called cognitive behavioral therapy, otherwise known as CBT. And the goal of CBT is to examine your thoughts critically, almost taking a step away from your thoughts and looking at it as an outsider looking in, and being able to evaluate based on a series of questions, logic-based questions, on whether or not that particular stressful thought is a truth or fact or fiction, they call it. Is it a fact or fiction, and where is the evidence? Because a lot of times for the most stressful thoughts that we have in our life, there isn't a lot of evidence that they're true. It's more of a prediction or an assumption or a guess or a fantasy, really. And those thoughts are really quite optional.
And I've been under the thumb of my own thoughts many times in my life, where I have this idea about me, and it's not true, but it's wreaking havoc in my life.
Yeah, exactly.
And it seems to live comfortably in me while I wiggle.
Well, that's funny, because in CBT they also talk about something called a core belief. And so sometimes when we have thoughts for a length of time, certainly if we have a parent or a family member, or even just an assumption we make about ourselves that we feel has been reinforced over time. But when we have certain thoughts that are reinforced over time, it's almost like they become a part of who we are and how we define ourselves in the world. So for example, the thought of not being very capable or not being very strong or something like that could affect a person on a really deep psychological level when it starts to become a part of the sense of self. And from that kind of anxiety, a lot of times depression will follow.
And so that's when a mindset goes from healthy to unhealthy. When it's sort of turned on yourself.
Yeah, healthy anxiety is actually, I call it the 5 P's of anxiety, because the function is so that we can predict. And so when we're having the thought, what if, we know that we're making some kind of a prediction, then we know that the anxiety is healthy if it's to plan, prepare, procure, and then problem solve through in order to find the solution to the problem. But that's assuming there is a solution to the problem. So for example, I don't spend a lot of time stressing about global warming, because I know that I'm not going to be the person to solve that problem. I do my part, and I'm sure you do as well, but there's certain things that we can just, categorically say, I don't need to stress about that because there really is very little I can do about it. Right? That's when we get into the serenity prayer. Have you heard of the serenity prayer?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's used by AA, and one of the things that I love about it is it teaches us to compartmentalize all of our stresses into two buckets, two categories. Those things that we have control over and that we should actually be putting some energy into, including some stress, because we need to find solutions. So we do the brainstorming and the asking for help and the planning and the problem solving. But there's so much in that other bucket, the things that we simply don't have control over. So the serenity prayer is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the strength to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And even if you're not a strong spiritual person, although I think you are, Ned, just because the word God is in there doesn't mean that it's not just an exquisite piece of logic.
Yeah, and it's very practical, simple advice, and which I love something that's simple.
Yeah.
You know, it's just easy to access when you're stressed. If you find triggers to get you out of your stress that are simple in nature.
There's a lot of different kinds of therapy that work well for stress, as well as just different approaches or exercises that we can do that help with stress. And a lot of them are actually really simple. I'm sorry, did I take the words out of your mouth?
You took the words right out of my mouth. Do
you want to ask your question now?
No, go ahead.
But yeah, a lot of, because it is a physiological response, a lot of what we would do for anxiety is first teach a client how to change their physiological response. And so because so much of that is based on thoughts, by watering down those thoughts, by changing our focus from whatever we're thinking and whatever we're experiencing physically in the body, and just bringing it gently back to something like the breath or the present moment, the awareness of the things in the room, 3 things that you see, 3 things that you hear, and 3 things that you feel physically with your body, such as the couch or the floor or my breath. That changes our focus away from the things that are stressing us the most, the physiological responses or the thoughts or the emotions themselves, into something that helps us to ground ourselves and simply take a step back from all of that in order to be able to gain control. It's like you have a volume knob and you're just turning the volume down on the anxiety. And it only takes seconds. Again, with clients who have practiced this, they can go from a 7 or an 8 out of 10 on the anxiety scale I just ask them, where are you in your anxiety scale in your head? And then just a few moments of breathing and grounding and looking around the room, and they can come right down within seconds. It's a powerful tool.
Yeah, I think that's such great and valuable information. Now, one question that I do have is, why is stress so prevalent these days? Why does it seem like it's bigger than other things going on?
Well, I think that society has evolved in a lot of ways, in many positive directions and maybe some that aren't as positive. But I believe that a lot of the techniques that are about busting stress are about reducing the amount of things that any person would be juggling in their mind or in their life. We're juggling so many things at once, right?
Okay.
The idea of I'm a multitasker, we wear it like a badge of honor. And yet in the past, if you can imagine someone who maybe was working a farm and they were plowing the field, and that's what they were doing. And what were they thinking about? Plowing the field. They would have a lot less stress than a person who's plowing the field, but then as soon as I'm done, I have to do this, and I have to do this, and I have to do this, right? And I think because of the digital age as well, our attention spans are extremely small. We need to be constantly stimulated and entertained, and we put value in multitasking and multi-thinking, if that's a word, to be able to feel as though we're effectively hitting all of our marks. But what we're forgetting is the beauty and the solitude and the impact that having one-minded thinking can bring. And it brings a lot of peace and awe to our lives when we can focus on one thing at a time, mindfully, which means paying attention to it fully and completely, without the distraction, without the judgment. This is what we call mindfulness. Have you heard of mindfulness before? Actually, you know all about mindfulness, what I'm talking about. You're an expert on mindfulness. It's more for our audience here that we're talking about this.
I learn every day in the fact
we all do.
You know, there's still, just because you know something, you're not at the end of the learning. And so I'm so happy to be here and talking about mindfulness with you.
Well, with my clients, I often will say that mindfulness is like peeling an onion. So just when you think you've gotten through a layer, there's another layer underneath and it goes deeper. And then there's another layer after that and it goes deeper. And so because I've practiced it as a practitioner and as a human being, but not as a yogi or a Buddhist monk, I'm assuming there's many more layers even to my own onion when it comes to mindfulness. But the experience seems to deepen almost for me personally. Each year that I practice it, it deepens. And it's almost like I understand it differently as time goes on. So for beginner practitioners, I think that it's just about learning to have a focused attention where they can choose to worry or not, choose to experience things in the present or not, but it becomes a choice. And I think that's where the power comes from. I think of it as like a superpower, where before mindfulness, whatever thoughts or feelings were happening in our brain are just hitting us like a cold bucket of water and we're drowning in it. After mindfulness, we have choices and we have power and we have control. We can say, this feels yucky and I don't like it, and I'm just going to stop feeling so stressed. I'm going to turn the volume knob right down on it. It's a pretty powerful tool.
I love that. You know, mindfulness is a superpower.
It is a superpower. You know what I mean?
we're all heroes and sheroes when we use that superpower.
Sheroes, I like that. That's cute. Yeah, so I told you before the interview started, and I'll tell you again that there was this amazing experience where, I mean, I knew I was using mindfulness in my day-to-day practice. Again, focused attention on the present, on the here and now, on the five senses, non-judgmentally. This is what I mean by mindfulness. But I didn't know how effective it was until I was in a snowstorm a couple of winters ago, where I believed that I would die. I swear, though I couldn't see the lines on the road. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. What I could see, though, were the taillights in the trucks in front of me. And I remember holding onto my steering wheel and saying some perhaps not so nice words, like, oh my God, and oh other things, and just really being worried that I was going to die. And I thought, well, my plan is to stay on the road. My plan is to get home, because I really couldn't see the exits anyway. And then I thought, why is the stress helping me? No, it's not. So why think about it? Why not just focus on the lights of the truck in front of me and the radio and my breath? And focusing on the breath is a very powerful thing. And just stop thinking about all of the bad things that could happen and simply focus on where I need to go and what I need to do. And for 3 hours, I swear I didn't have a single thought. And I didn't know that I'd gotten to that level of mindfulness practice, but I guess necessity is the mother of invention, and all of a sudden I had to, and there it was. But what a brilliant experience that was for me. Yeah.
And that's just the power that it holds. It'll show you something you don't know.
That's right.
And that's one of the greatest gifts I've found with mindfulness, is it's taught me things that I didn't know. Because you're going into a much deeper place in yourself.
Right.
Now, for a person who says, I can't stop stressing, you know, or I can't stop being this way, what would you say to that person?
Well, it's very similar to a person saying that they can't swim. If you go into the water and you panic, then you're not going to be able to swim. But if you go into the water and you learn how to not panic and you do the motions, even though you may not be swimming in the beginning and you might be struggling, eventually you're going to learn how to swim. And for mindfulness practice, I think where a lot of clinicians maybe miss the mark is they forget to tell people how awful they're going to be at it in the beginning. If you begin as a person just learning mindfulness, you are not going to be able to not worry. You are not going to be able to not allow certain thoughts and judgments to come into your mind. But I like to look at it as exercise. So when we're exercising, let's say I'm going to create bicep muscles, right? The action of bringing your arm up is just as important as the release. The pulling forward is just as important as the release. You really can't have one with the other. And when I think about mindfulness, what I think of is that we draw our attention to our present experience, and we try to not think all those thoughts, and we simply observe and describe and participate. But then the distraction is going to happen. And when it does, instead of judging it, because we're not really meant to be judging when we're doing mindfulness, we simply acknowledge that experience non-judgmentally. Oh look, there come the worry thoughts again. But I know what to do. I just simply draw my attention back to my body, back to mindfulness, and then when the distraction comes again, I only get another opportunity to stretch that mindful muscle. And the more we do this, the more powerful it becomes, because then the distractions become less and less. And eventually, we're swimming.
And you're strong.
And we're strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really key point to starting a mindfulness practice, or to moving away from stress. It's we don't just start out in just because we've decided in this moment it's done.
No, exactly.
You know, there's
it's
some momentum there.
It's a process, right? And there's a lot of work involved, to be honest. It's pleasant work. It's lovely work, right? I don't want to scare anybody off by the work, 4-letter word work. But it is work. I mean, if we don't practice, we probably won't get to the place that we want to get to.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you know, I quite often feel the inertia of all this, or the energy of all the things I've done in the past, sort of push at us. And if we are changing a practice, or you're starting a new behavior, then you still have all that momentum of your past coming at you, and the idea is that you just don't touch it. You just, when you notice it, you grab onto the past, your past fears or stresses, or that you just, again, you let it go. Each time you let it go, you burn out the momentum that it's creating.
That's a nice analogy. I like that. I often think that depression is often rooted in the past. When we have thoughts that are of a depressive nature, it's usually, if only things were different, if only I hadn't done that thing or said that thing or made this choice, if only I were better or different, or the world was, or my parents were, or something like that, right? And that's very past-based thinking. And then with anxiety, I notice that it's a lot of very future-based thinking, which is what if? So what if this goes wrong, or what if I can't, or what if, whatever it is, right? And then I find that mindfulness practice allows us to come back to the present. And that is another part of the superpower, is because in the present, that's where we actually have the strength and the capacity to make choices and affect change, because we can't change the past. We can't actually predict accurately the future in order to make exact changes there either. I'm not saying that we never think about those things, but we want to do so in a controlled way where it becomes a choice and it's time limited and it doesn't drown us. And I think that's the important part about mindfulness practice, is it gives us choice.
That's right. And too much time in the past or the future, you know, is what creates a lot of stresses. It's been in my life, that's how it's been. When I'm in the past or in the future, and I'm not present, then, you know, it's just a breeding ground for stress.
Exactly. So it's lovely to know that we can bring our attention back to the present. And for people just beginning out with mindfulness, that's what I suggest that they do, is just, if they notice in any moment that they're doing something where they could be mindful, to just take a moment and try. So mindful eating spaghetti, mindful taking a shower, mindful going for a walk, which is one of my favorites, by the way. And that just means observing through your 5 senses everything that you can observe. So mindful walking would include, you know, feeling the breeze, smelling the air. Have you ever noticed that every season has its own smell? You know, when you become mindful and you start to practice this on a daily basis, you really notice when the seasons are changing that there's a different smell in the air, and it gives you a sense of awe. And for spiritual people, that awe can be a direct line to their spirituality. For non-spiritual people, it just gives them a sense of bliss as well. And obviously those things are connected to less anxiety and overall more happiness and more peace.
That's right. Else that you want to add to what you've said today?
I guess just that there's many different therapies that we offer here at Chat that are effective for stress. My favorites, again, are CBT, and when we add in some other techniques to CBT, then we have DBT. So dialectical behavioral therapy is cognitive behavioral therapy with the addition of a lot of the Buddhist psychology applications, including mindfulness, but other things as well. Interpersonal effectiveness, emotion regulation, dealing with trauma, things like that. We can all deal with it so much better having this sort of building blocks of how to cope. And I think that's really important.
I have heard good things about that therapy as well.
That's good. Probably from me.
You and others?
Oh, you? Okay, that's
Yeah.
good. That's good. Yeah. So there's medication can also be helpful for anxiety. It's antidepressant medications is sort of my preference. There's sedatives as well, but they can become addictive. So for anybody that's taking that kind of medication, I mean, obviously with their doctor's consultation, my goal is typically to use other techniques, psychological techniques, in order to wean them off. Because then, if you don't have your anti-anxiety medication and you're in an anxiety-provoking situation, it's going to be worse because you won't know what to do other than taking the medication. So it's psychologically addictive too. You become dependent on it. Whereas if you have psychological techniques, you never get to leave home without them. They're yours.
That's
and you
right.
can have them at your disposal 24/7, which is kind of powerful and exciting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for all the great tips and,
You're welcome.
and the knowledge and wisdom you've shared with us here today.